should we talk about copper? Because that's been a
Let's do
recent
copper.
topic that has come up.
This is something I know nothing about, so you're gonna have to,
Okay, let
um,
me ask you something.
train.
Have you heard copper in the past couple of weeks coming up?
Yes, but I've been hearing more about gold and silver.
Okay, we started hearing about gold and silver the past couple weeks, and then all of a sudden, copper just became like top of mind. And all of a sudden, I started seeing videos on X about copper, the references to the S&P Global report of the copper shortage, and then Chamath on the All In podcast started talking about how copper is the big winner of 2026. That was his sort of like major prediction for 2026, that is that copper is going to be this thing. And I was thinking to myself, Chamath has probably one of the most dismal public track records of what he says versus what he's actually doing. He might be shorting copper at this point. You never know with that guy. It's so
If
funny
only he
because
had a savvy trader portfolio.
that's right. Only if he was a little bit more transparent about what he was doing, because he's been known to pump his SPACs while at the same time selling the same stocks that he was pumping. But um, what's funny is that even Jason sort of makes fun of him on the show, which is a great show, by the way. The All In Pod. I listened to
Yeah,
that
I agree.
podcast, and despite Jamal, by the way, is my least favorite person on the show. But despite uh, him, it's a good show. But Jason makes fun of Chamath for his integrity. So one of his best friends is pretty clear that he sort of lacks a little bit of integrity there, which is kind of ironic. But anyway, moving back to copper, um, which is sort of like an interesting topic. I actually have some stuff to show. Let's see. They so there's a report by the S&P Global, and I saw this chart, which I found super interesting. I don't know if you can. Are you looking at the chart right
Yeah,
now?
yeah, yeah, that's
Okay.
coming up.
Okay, perfect. So this chart basically shows in blue the copper expected demand according to the S&P Global, and then I'm sorry, the demand is in blue and the red is the supply. And what's funny is that you can kind of see that the blue and the red kind of go hand in hand in a linear growth curve. So it's like roughly 3% annually, all the way to 2030. But then they anticipate that in 2030, which is like 4 or 5 years from now, all of a sudden, that's going to be the peak of copper production. And then copper is going to flat out and then even go down as much as like 10 years from now, as if they can predict that far in advance. And then and by 2040, there's going to be this massive gap in demand versus supply. And by the way, the supply is not going up in a exponential way. It's just like roughly 3%. It just remains 3% global demand growth, which is basically a straight line. It's not crazy
And
growth all of a sudden. This is not
what's
like the memory shortage growth or something like that, right?
what's the
This is
cause for the demand?
the demand is just like it's been going up 3% every year annually for like the previous 10 years too. It's just it just the prediction here is that the supply is suddenly going to stop in 2030. And that just got me thinking, is that like what are some of the other predictions that S&P Global has made? Do you remember a few years ago that they made predictions that because of EV vehicles, battery, um, the stuff that goes into batteries like lithium and nickel and zinc and all these other minerals were going to be like in major demand, and there's going to be supply shortages worldwide.
Mhm.
And that they predicted that like roughly 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, and none of that came to fruition, by the way. So prices sort of like had this sort of interesting blip and then went back down. But this graph in particular just had me kind of like amused, because then I did a little bit more research on Grok about like copper, and then I saw that, for example, the 50% of the global production of copper comes from Chile, number one, Congo, number two, and Peru, number three. US is not until number six, and we only produce 5% of copper. And one of the reasons that they said that copper supply was going to be in major short supply is because of environmental reasons and like getting licensing approvals and things that are very American oriented. You know, some of these issues are not as big of issues in some of these other countries. I don't think Congo has the same kind of levels of environmental or licensing issues that the US has. So 50% of global copper supply comes from these three countries. And if these three countries decided to increase their supply by simply 6% annually, that would address the entire global supply or global demand requirements over the next 15 years, right?
Mm.
So, like this is one of those things that, by the way, this is not my wheelhouse. I know nothing about it. I don't invest in rare earth minerals in any by any means. So all these experts are probably right, and you should never be taking advice from me. But like when I hear everybody and their mother jumping into a particular thing, such as copper, all of a sudden, in the matter of 2 weeks, going from like nobody being interested in copper 2 weeks ago to all of a sudden everybody wanting to buy copper, it just makes me chuckle. And I'm like, I have zero FOMO. Copper could quadruple in price over the next day, and I would not give one iota of a care if that happens, because I would have no idea when to sell, when the hype is over. I'm not going to buy something because of hype. um, I want to know that, like, I personally think that the demand supply curve makes sense, and it's a product, and it's a company, and it's US based, and like all of these things that sort of make an investment wise from my perspective. So uh, the answer to copper and whether or not I'm buying copper is no. I've been asked that question so many times in the past week. It was just shocking. It just came out of nowhere, but from multiple different people. Um, Anyway, so that's my little copper rant.
I guess this is why America stopped producing the penny. They needed to save their
Yeah,
copper.
that's right. There's people who are like literally buying pennies in the hopes that they can like melt it down and sell the copper someday. It's
Mhm.
like, okay. Every penny
And
might be worth like 2 or 3 pennies down the road. So you never know.
it's and it seems like it's not just copper. A lot of these metals are hitting all-time highs like
Mhm.
silver and gold. What are your thoughts about like this general metal movement?
Yeah, I don't know the reason for silver. The reason for gold feels like it's always the Armageddon story, right? As everything moves closer and closer to Armageddon, gold and Bitcoin should be moving up in general. And Bitcoin hasn't had the greatest 1 year, but prior to that, that was sort of like the story. The Armageddon story is very strong with pro Bitcoin and pro gold people. And again, I don't buy either one of those two products from an investment perspective. I have some Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin is the smarter gold. Um, and yeah, I don't have any gold. So um, yeah,
So
that's my perspective on those.